Melia the Maid, honestly, this one I'm not going to cover only because their entry just strikes me as one that's really boring to make a video about. I'd run out of ways to say, yep, he's a bigot, and I would just be repeating myself.
Well, that clip has not aged well, given the title of this video.
As you just saw in that clip I played, when I announced my project to re-examine all the entries on the VTuber Blacklist, one name that I said I wouldn't re-examine was Melia the Maid. It was mainly because most of the evidence the Blacklist showed regarding him was proof he was a bigot, and I didn't have anything else at the time, so I would have just been saying, yep, he's a bigot. Well, I've changed my mind. In hindsight, I should have put Time for Mayhem on the list of blacklisted VTubers I wouldn't re-examine the segment of instead of Melia. Now, before anyone jumps to any conclusions, yes, Time for Mayhem does deserve to be on the blacklist. The reason I'm not going to review her entry is, well, I found myself looking her up on Twitter one day since I wanted to see if any other threads had come out about her. And I stumbled upon her Twitter account, which currently looks like this. Now, before you say anything, I know that's actually her because she did actually share a post exposing her misdeeds and basically confirmed she was the same person. Because of how bizarre this development is, and from what little I do know about Time for Mayhem, she wasn't like a political VTuber, I have decided that I've earned a get out of jail free card, so I'm going to use it in this instance. Also, as you can see in the post that she shares confirming that she is the same person, Time for Mayhem isn't disputing any of the stuff she's accused of, so I don't feel the need to really go over her allegations again. Now, if her ex was to ask me to make a video calling her out, or if some more stuff came out about her, then I would make a video on her. But until that happens, let's move on. I know this might seem odd to begin with a flashback to a previous video of mine, but the alternative would be to talk about how the VTuber sphere recently has had people ask if there was a bigotry problem. Although, now that I think about it, actually that is relevant to this video, so let's talk about that. So, as of the past year or so, there has been some significant discussion about if certain parts of the VTuber sphere are too accepting or even outright encourage bigotry. You might remember the whole controversy surrounding the Gods video, or the whole controversy currently surrounding Kirsch's, well, everything. And there's also the VTuber Niara, who's come under attack by a bunch of chuds for making videos where she advocates for trans rights. Now, I would actually argue that bigoted VTubers are the exception, not the rule, although unfortunately it's very easy for most bigoted VTubers to gain an audience. I imagine that for those of you who aren't immediately rushing down to the comments to call me a woke VTuber, alright, I don't have hand tracking set up so you can't see my air quotes, you probably have one example that comes to mind.
For me, one recent example that comes to mind is Daisy May, who, after making statements saying that people didn't need an entire month to celebrate their gender or sex, and then doubling down when people started to disagree with her, as well as making some really batshit insane arguments. I cannot believe I have to say this, but by definition, gay men do not have sex with women at all. She then proceeded to embrace the label, welcoming all homophobic fans she'd gotten. Although she did so somewhat cowardly, since she later changed the wording of her tweet welcoming them to make it seem like she was under attack, and also deleted the tweets where she asked why people needed a whole month to celebrate Pride. But fortunately, people were able to screen cap the tweets I'm showing. But this video isn't about Daisy May.
If you were somehow watching this without reading the title, and you didn't pay attention to any of the names I brought up so far, I am talking about Melia the Maid, also known as Usagi Calamari. So, you might wonder how I know that Usagi is Melia. Well, I actually have some really solid proof. Let's listen to a comparison of Usagi's voice with Melia's, as well as another VTube named Shimiku Kuuzu. I am including Shimiku in this for reasons you'll understand in a second.
We got recommended channels and someone that's playing Horrorcow.
750.
Whoa, she's got tits.
It's been a while though. I haven't played my Scavin forever.
Right. Yep.
Kaneko, hold on. Do I follow this person? No. You know? Holy fucking titties! Just like go on her Twitter, there's more titties.
I think this one's okay.
Never open Twitter is only today's.
Okay. Dude, another epic. Oh, I love it. I'm definitely equipped this one. All right. I guess that's all right. I mean, should I even try putting the voice changer on, or that'll probably fuck it up again, huh?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. I
Dude,
guess
another.
that's all right. I mean, should I even try putting the voice changer on,
Oh,
or
I
that'll
love
probably
it.
fuck it up
I'm
again,
definitely
huh?
equipped this one.
As you can see, or rather, as you just heard, all three of those VTubers are in fact the same person. And if you need even more proof, here's a screenshot of Melia admitting to being Shimiku. Also, and I know this personally, don't ask how,
Melia was really into making fun of Darkside Phil, which if you look at Usagi's profile, you can see pretty easily. In general, he's really into making fun of lol cows. Although, funnily enough, this actually caused him to get into a Twitter argument with a particularly infamous one named Ethan Ralph, which I'm showing right now. If you want to know who he is, incidentally, I actually made a video on him, which people who are familiar with actually have said is a pretty good introduction to Ralph.
it is rather ironic considering that I'd argue that Melia is a lol cow very much in the same vein as Ethan Ralph. And as I mentioned, I actually made a video on the Ralpha male. Oh right, I don't have hand tracking set up on this model, so no air quotes are visible. So I would know. And also like Ralph, as well as John Del Raz, Melia is what I like to call a basement pisser. No, Melia has not actually done that act as far as I know, but it's more of a name I use to refer to people with a specific mindset, namely liking anti-woke content in the vein of the quartering. I say this because, well, while Melia doesn't make anti-woke content, as far as I can tell, Melia just streams games. He is a fan of the Side Scrollers podcast, which does tend to post stuff in that direction. So, since this is the second time I've looked at someone who is on the VTuber Blacklist, which I decided to re-examine everyone on there for reasons I detail in a Google Doc I have linked in the description. In case you're curious, the first time was Draco's Star Scale, which I actually only made the first because, well, someone accused me of being him. It's a long story. But anyways, you might be wondering if I think Melia should be on the list. Normally I would save that answer for the end of the video, but in this case, I'm gonna answer it right now. The answer is yes, but also no. What do I mean? Well, his current entry should not be on the list because it's actually rather incomplete. They do provide evidence of him being a bigot, specifically transphobia and racism, as well as him harassing people and defending someone who's a pedophile, but they don't include evidence of him sexually harassing people, being fatphobic, or being a pedophile, even though they do list that as reasons why he's blacklisted. Back when I had originally said I wasn't going to re-examine his entry, I pointed out that if the blacklist was putting him on there for being a pedophile just because he was into lolicon, then they should also put every other VTuber who is into lolicon on the blacklist. I'm going to take a wild guess and say that it wasn't because he's into lolicon that they put him on the blacklist and listed pedophilia as one of the reasons. So, what has he actually done? Well, let's take a look. But first, I feel that I have to give a content warning. Warning, the following video contains discussion of the following: sexual harassment, Nazism, and pedophilia. Viewer discretion is advised. Anyways, as usual, do not harass anyone I bring up in this video, although Melia himself really should take that lesson to heart. And you can probably figure out what the first thing I'm going to look at involving him is. Let's get started.
Like I said, kids are cool, Jack. And I'm very in touch with my inner child.
Now, before we get into this segment, there is one thing I'd like to note. There is one example that I'm not going to bring up, largely because it's more appropriate for the last segment.
I'm gonna give you a bit of context that might seem unrelated, but you'll understand why by the time I'm finished explaining. You may recall that now removed Vice article from a few months ago that called out several statements that Kirsch Verstahl made. Because Kirsch is associated with Gamersubs, quite a few people have opted to end their partnership with Gamersubs over this. One of these people was Rin Penrose. Now, with the other people, there was at least some wiggle room, since this also occurred around the same time as the whole drama involving Cinder. Rin, however, explicitly stated it was because of the brand associating with creators whose views conflicted with her own, and the company not responding to her on the issue. While she didn't outright name the creator in question, said answer only really makes sense if she's alluding to Kirsch, not Cinder, since she said views, not actions. Full disclaimer, Rin Penrose is one of my favorite VTubers, albeit this is an opinion I developed before this all happened. Now, most people just shrugged and went about their way, or even applauded Rin for her decision. Hell, even a few people who are normally on Kirsch's side actually said it was pointless to attack Rin over this. You'd have to be some reactionary moron who's just desperate for content to even think of making an attack on her in tweet form, let alone video form. Now, you might wonder, why is this relevant to Melia? Well, Melia stupidly decided to try and attack Rin over this. This blew up in his face because he got a ton of people roasting him in the replies. And it also brought up something I'll get to later. And in the event Melia watches this video, I have to ask, why do you care? There's no way in hell that GamerSubs would have made you a partner over you attacking Rin, and if Rin had just handled this behind the scenes and GamerSubs quietly removed her from their website, it would have actually looked bad for Rin. She had every right to end the partnership when she wanted, and if she wanted to end it over Kirsch's views, that's perfectly fine. But that's not all. One thing you'll notice if you follow Melia for long enough is that he has quite the hatred of people who do sex work. One example that comes to mind is Cherryco, a British succubus VTuber. Melia would sexually harass her in chat, and from what Cherryco describes, it sounds like Melia had his fans brigade her, which, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's against Twitch's terms of service. Now, one thing I've seen some people, Melia himself included, try and do is pull a gotcha moment by claiming Cherryco is a hypocrite for sexualizing herself, but then complaining about people like Melia sexually harassing her. And to those people, all I have to say is that consent is a thing, and when Cherryco is posting risque or not safe for work photos of herself, she is consenting to that. She is not consenting to Melia sexualizing her. Maybe if you understood this, you'd actually have a chance of getting a woman. I did try and speak with Cherryco, but one of her mods said she wasn't comfortable talking about this, and quite frankly, I don't blame her, and I didn't push the issue any further. This isn't the only case where he's attacked someone for doing sex work, since he's also gone after Reedle64. Yeah, I'll get to her stuff in a future video, but I'm not gonna go over the allegations against her here, since, well, so far, the track record against her is 0 for 3. And before you ask, no, she had no role in making me decide to make this video. In fact, I actually asked her about what Melia did to her, and like Cherryco, she actually declined to elaborate. So I'm using the few posts by the VTuber Blacklist that I could find. I'll get back to Angel Girl ASMR in a second, but if you actually look at the people who are on that cursed page, the VTuber Blacklist, if you haven't figured out who Melia is referring to, his claim falls to pieces since, well, the thing is, Draco Starscale, who I have made a video on, as I mentioned, has absolutely no connection to Reedle64, and I did look. I also know for a fact that Toastify has absolutely no connection to Reedle64 either. In fact, I'm inclined to say that the majority of people who are on the blacklist have no connection to Reedle64. Melia has also accused Reedle of faking having dissociative identity disorder. Now, I could point out that since Melia doesn't offer any evidence, I can just dismiss his claim with the same amount of evidence, but since Melia seems to think that you can only have an opinion on the topic of mental illness if you talk about having said mental illness, here is something my friend Atoz, who is very open about having dissociative identity disorder, had to say when I asked her about this. DID is a covert disorder, which means systems are more likely to avoid talking about their disorder and hide that they have switched or have the disorder at all due to the negative stigma society has placed on them and several other factors including trust and fear. Shu not talking about her DID makes her no more or less likely to have DID than us knowing if Schrodinger's cat is alive or dead until we see under the box. I also asked Reedle, or rather Shu, about this. I have spoken to her in the past for some of my videos, and after she got really angry over what Melia was saying and gave me a bit of an earful, she gave me an actual screenshot showing that she was, in fact, diagnosed. Because Melia was willing to make a blatantly false claim about something that there is significant evidence to the contrary about, I do not regret not reaching out to him at all. all. Melia would also try and bring up the allegations against Riedel, but as I've stated in my previous videos, given that so far every allegation made against Riedel that I've found has ended up being false, I have no reason to believe Melia, especially since, just like Thunder Raven, go watch my previous video if you want to know why I'm saying that, I have a reason to believe Melia was just deflecting for reasons I'll get into later. Now, if you want an example of Melia being a hypocrite with his harassment, he's attacked people for associating with Marina and Sylvie Spark, two, let's say, controversial VTubers. Okay, before anyone says anything, I am aware that Sylvie Spark and Marina have been accused of a lot of stuff. If you guys want me to look into the stuff they've been accused of, by all means, send it to me and I'll look into it. Although it will take me a while since not only do I work full-time, I also have committed to a few videos for the next few months. I'm only saying controversial because at the moment, I haven't done a super deep dive, so I'm not entirely familiar with the lore. Yet the funny thing is, Melia is more than happy to associate with a different controversial VTuber. One who you're probably quite familiar with if you have been following me for long enough, Akuma Miko. And would you look at that? My theory about Akuma being linked to every VTuber who is a terrible person is correct once again. Although this is a bit of an odd one, since Akuma does seem to be aware of Melia's misdeeds as Shimiku. I guess it's possible she genuinely might not know that Melia is Usagi. He's also attacked people for associating with Nyara, who I'll get back to in a bit, as you can see here. Yet the funny thing is that when a VTuber who had been friendly to him before by the name of Suki of the Sea found out what Melia was really like and what he'd actually done, and thus decided to cut ties, Melia got really upset over this. For the record, I do not hold this against Suki. I would absolutely believe her if she said that she wouldn't have befriended Melia knowing what she knows now. Funnily enough, in the replies, I found this comment, which, based on what I've shown so far, in fact, I'm pretty sure the first example given was the stuff I brought up involving Cherryco, I completely agree with. There's also the fact that he was willing to stand by one Angel Girl ASMR, who I am not going to comment on the allegations against her since I do plan on re-examining her entry on the blacklist myself in the future, although from what I have read, it does not look good for her. This also led him to harass another VTuber named Bumbaloops, who had called out Angel Girl ASMR. I am also inclined to believe that this is one of the other reasons why he harassed Riedel64. So anyways, as I've established, Melia has quite the hatred for sex workers, and you probably won't be surprised to know that in general, he happens to be quite the bigot.
You'd be cooler than that, Jack.
So while I was looking for evidence, one tweet of Melia's stood out to me, which I'm showing on screen right now. Now, there is certainly a discussion here, and I mean that in a neutral sense, but regardless of how much of a discussion you could actually have, Melia is one of the last people who should be part of this discussion, because as it turns out, Melia is actually extremely racist. Remember how I brought up a previous identity of his named Shimiku Kuwuzu? Well, that's relevant because, as you can see from this screenshot an account he'd blocked took, at one point, said VTuber identity was using blackface on one of their models. I'm pretty sure said model is a ripoff of Zhongli from Genshin Impact. All signs I've found point towards Melia being a white guy in his 40s. And to that I have to say, damn Melia, you sure are pathetic. And that's not all. There's also him commenting on a quite racist meme that showed a police body cam photo of a black woman about to get shot to death. There's also this that I found, which, while I wouldn't necessarily say it's outright racist, it's very questionable at best, since he's trying to start a movement to turn Black History Month into a lolicon/shotacon month. Obviously, it failed, since I haven't seen anyone else try and make this a thing. This is just bizarre, to say the least. Melia is also a bit fat phobic, as you can see here. Hey Melia, you do know that eating disorders are a thing, right? Also, for all you know, those people could actually be trying to lose weight, but just keeping their progress to themselves. Making fun of someone who is in circumstances for reasons beyond their control, or someone who is actually trying to improve themselves, isn't being edgy or funny, it just makes you an asshole. Also, I've seen what you look like in real life thanks to photos that have been posted online, and all I have to say is, I sure hope the glass house you're living in has really strong walls, because you're not just throwing stones, you're shooting the walls up.
Melia is also insanely transphobic, accusing people like Yumi and Nyara, who are not cisgender, of being groomers without any proof, aside from statements in favor of trans rights, which I would like to state is not grooming. These two names will pop up later in the video. In fact, I even found a few cases where he even outright states that he doesn't think trans kids should exist. Yet the funny thing is, he has absolutely no sense of self-awareness. When someone referred to him as Melia, he acted as if they were dead-naming him. That's not even remotely comparable. Okay, now this next segment kind of feels like it would be a sub-segment of this one, but given how much evidence there is, as well as the fact that it is kind of out of left field and does require a bit of context, I'm just gonna be blunt. Melia is a Nazi. Now, let me make one thing abundantly clear. I am not calling Melia a Nazi just because he may or may not have conservative political beliefs, although he does have very right-wing political posts. Actions speak louder than words, and in Melia's case, there are a few actions in particular that make me call him a Nazi. For example, he's reposted ecchi pictures featuring characters with swastikas and other Nazi symbols prominent. I'm gonna censor these since I'd rather not find out the hard way if YouTube's policies are stricter against ecchi or Nazi symbols, but if you want to see the uncensored photos, they will be in the master drive of evidence. Bit of advice, don't look up that Sean Axe account because it's full of Nazi stuff. I say this as someone who made the mistake of going there. And I'm not gonna comment on the fact that one of these photos has an Israeli flag prominently displayed, mainly because this isn't really the video to get into current events related to that flag. And I know that someone or Melia himself is gonna say that the swastika has other meanings. However, there was also an incident where he tweeted out that he needed art of his VTuber model in a Nazi uniform. Arendelle actually made a video on this one, and I have considered saying she covered everything there is with Melia, but then I looked at all the evidence and changed my mind, and also some stuff came out after her video dropped. Go watch her video if you want a more in-depth look at Melia's desire for a Nazi uniform. Now, I would like to point out that in my VTuber lore, I have an evil twin, Siegfried, whose model I'm using right now, so if you've ever wondered why I sometimes use a different model on my streams, now you know why. And even though I kind of have an excuse, I would never think of doing something like this with said evil twin. This isn't even a one-time thing. Melia would later tweet a photo that I'm gonna say is AI generated of Silvervale, Mary, and Fillion wearing SS uniforms, saying he wanted someone to draw his model in that outfit. I don't know if they could sue Melia for defamation, but if they can, I would suggest they consider doing so. And Melia later tweeted this. The artist in question, who Melia is replying to, would later grant Melia's wish. And there was also this, which I don't really have anything to add. You know, nowadays, most people I see online who happen to subscribe to neo-Nazi beliefs, or at least have beliefs adjacent to those, are usually some of the most insecure assholes on the planet, such as Nick Fuentes still being in the closet, or pretty much everything about Styx Hexenhammer. I'm willing to bet that Melia has similar insecurities, but as you can probably tell from how much is left of the video, I've yet to get to the worst thing about Melia, namely he's a pedophile. Yeah, this is the third time in a row that I've talked about a VTuber who was into kids. If you know about Melia as of recent, you probably already knew this one was coming. See, when I made my Lucian video, I noted that the VTuber Blacklist said he was a pedophile, but didn't really give any evidence. I stated that if they were labeling him as a pedophile based solely on the fact that he was into lolicon, then they should put Rev Says Desu, or pretty much any other VTuber you can think of that's into lolicon on the blacklist for pedophilia. Obviously they didn't. Although, part of me wishes they had, simply because it would have been hilarious to see the blacklist basically commit suicide by giving Rev a reason to make a video attacking them. Now, given the title of this segment and how I've started things off, I imagine that a good chunk of you already think you know where this video is going. So you know what? I'll let you just post your hate comments right now. Okay, now that I imagine that I've given a few people an opportunity to make themselves look stupid, it's time for me to explain why, regardless of how I feel about Lolicon, Melia's stance on the subject has nothing to do with why I added this segment to the video. No, I'm putting this segment in the video because, well, Melia is an actual pedophile. And I only put that previous bit in there because I know if I don't address it, Melia will just take me out of context and say that I'm calling him one because he's into Lolicon. One example of him being an actual pedophile comes from someone who goes by Yumi online. I did get permission to share this from them because it is actually kind of embarrassing. They had talked to Melia in the past on Discord, and the discussion took a somewhat disturbing turn when the topic of being caught while masturbating came up. Pun unintended, but unavoidable. Now, I think the only appropriate responses are either, man, that sucks, or just changing the subject, because this is something that's rather embarrassing. It's why I actually felt obligated to ask for permission to share this first. But that's not where it ended. As you saw at the start, Melia actually commented, "That's hot," in response to finding out that Yumi got caught masturbating as a child, and then proceeded to make the discussion even more sexual, despite Yumi being indifferent at best. Yumi has called Melia out over this, and Melia hasn't tried to defend himself from Yumi or anyone who has posted this in the replies to Melia's post. At best, Melia will just deflect. It's almost as if Melia knows that this is extremely damning to him. Oh, and before Melia or anyone else tried to say that he found the fact that Yumi was caught in the act hot, if that's the case, then that raises a lot of questions about why he constantly posts about Darkside Phil, given a particular clip that Darkside Phil is quite infamous for. But I'm not gonna open that can of worms, so I'm gonna get back to the video at hand. That's not all. He also jerked off to a model belonging to a 16-year-old. I was actually able to track down the original post, which I'm showing right now. And I know what you're gonna say. This doesn't name Melia, so how do I know it's talking about him? Well, I stumbled upon this post while I was looking around, and I have very good reason to believe that it's the one that is being referenced. And I did ask them, and they said that Maddie's post was probably the one they were referring to, and since I could not find anything else, the stuff Yumi posted happened after Maddie's post, I have no reason to believe that Rika is referring to something else. First of all, the dates match up since this was published before Yumi had their experience. Second, I'd say that having a grown man tell you that he jacked off to your model as a minor would be a disturbing message. And lastly, considering what we saw with the stuff in Yumi's DMs, he does get off on stuff involving minors. Also, assuming the screenshot was taken around the time Maddie's post was first made, then that means Melia was jacking off to a trans minors model. So, in addition to everything in Maddie's post, we also know that Melia sent nudes of himself to a minor. So that's 2, possibly 3, in case Rika Thorne was actually referring to something else, instances of Melia getting off to stuff involving minors. These things make all the times that Melia has falsely accused a trans person of grooming, such as these examples with Niara, come across as projection given what Melia has actually done. And for the record, supporting trans kids is not grooming under any definition of the word. One of these is also kind of concerning since Melia also linked a video by Tectone in a quote tweet. Now, you might wonder why I'm bringing this up, but the thing is, Tectone has been accused of SA and also threatened Niara by saying, "Don't make me call my dad." Said dad has been convicted of SA 14 times, not defamation since it's true, in response to one of Niara's replies. For the record, I believe Tectone's ex, and if he sees this, all I have to say is, go fuck yourself. It also makes the fact that Rev Says Desu is accusing Niara of being a groomer without any proof kind of hypocritical because you have an actual pedophile using this as an excuse to bash someone he doesn't like. Hey Rev, why haven't you called out Melia? You had no problem calling out Kiro the Wolf's VTuber rebrand, or are you choosing not to because Melia's politics align with your own? He's only given people who hate lolicon ammo since he's a legitimate pedophile who's into the stuff. This also goes for pretty much any anti-woke VTuber who comments on drama as well. As long as you guys continue to tolerate people like Melia in the VTuber sphere, you have no right to call anyone a groomer. Now, like I said, I'm not saying that Melia is a pedophile just because he's into lolicon, but given what I've shown so far, it does paint some of his posts, which you could have argued were just him talking about lolicon up until now, in a very different light, given that we now have new context to look at them from. Like this example right here, and this one as well, which I'm pretty sure is AI. Wait a second. Melia is a Nazi and a pedophile. I never thought I'd say this, but we have a VTuber version of Oscar Deilerwanger. And if you're wondering how I know about that guy, let's just say that playing a lot of Hearts of Iron 4 mods introduced me to quite a few historical figures that I probably wouldn't have even considered looking into otherwise. Also, bit of a funny story. Remember how I mentioned that Ethan Ralph and Melia had an argument early on? Well, there was actually one screenshot I didn't include, but I'm gonna show it now because it's more relevant here. That's right, Ethan Ralph was actually correct about Melia being a pedophile, although I highly doubt he knew what I've shown about Melia so far. You know, I don't really have anything else to say about this, so you know what? I'm just gonna wrap things up right here.
You know, I normally try and be civil when I'm concluding my videos, but I've decided to make an exception. Melia, you are a pathetic waste of oxygen and cells. You are someone whose presence in the VTubing sphere drags the medium as a whole down. You are a Nazi pedophile and someone that no one should defend, and a man whose only contribution to the VTuber sphere is constantly getting Super Saiyan and 4, Go Ujita, and Perfect Cell memes in the replies of his posts. You are an insecure, pathetic human being, and quite frankly, I think you should graduate from VTubing right now. That actually felt pretty cathartic. Anyways, my next video should be more positive, but in the meantime, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching. I'm Andres Rebel, and I'll see you on my next assignment. Later.